I found writing research proposals for a conference, for a grant, for for graduate school or any kind of fellowship abroad. Research proposals are a necessary part of academia, and I found them some of the more difficult things to do because they force me to narrow down in a relatively small space what I want to do, why I want to do it, and why it matters. When I apply to academic conferences like other academics in the before times, though now a lot of them have moved to Zoom, um, you have 2 to 500 words to try to make your case for why a conference should invite me to speak, for why a university should want to invite me to go do research, for me to go do my PhD or whatever. Proposing research, proposing a project, it's a sales job. It's an academic sales job, but it's something that you're likely to have to do in a lot of other areas in your life, whether it's written down or making a pitch in a meeting. It is trying to explain succinctly what you want and why they should want to help you get to the destination that you want to reach. And so research proposals are the distillation of the research process in a lot of ways because it involves a lot of what will turn out to be in the final product, but it also requires a lot of underlying knowledge and research about what's been done already, what are the interesting problems out there that need solving, and where we can kind of make that contribution. And so in my classes, my upper division undergraduate classes, I have students write literature reviews to get familiarity with a specific literature or topic to see what's out there, what's been done before, to kind of map the terra incognita of a specific area that you might not have seen before. And that once you create that kind of rough draft map, then you can try to figure out where you want to go, what needs more shading and filling in, and then you can try to get others to help you to get to that process. And so research proposals are that kind of, this is a long way, a winded way of kind of saying they're this kind of gateway to the finished product. And so for research papers in my classes or in graduate classes, honors degrees or PhDs, they all involve this kind of stage in which you have to kind of sit down and figure out what you want to do and why you want to do it. So I've written a brief guide, well, brief, it's a 9-page guide to research proposals for my Australian Research Council Discovery Grant. For most of the grants, proposals can be up to 10 pages long. Some, like I said, for a conference could be a couple of hundred words. My classes, we have 500 words to work with, and so it really does focus the mind and to try to figure out what you want to include and what not. So I have this 9-page proposal guide, and I wanted to go through a little bit of that now as a way to help you work through this process in the same way. And I've been through this process a lot for different goals. This is Bates Hall in the Boston Public Library. This is where I came when I was writing my proposal for what turned into my master's thesis. I had coursework, and then I wanted to do a research component of the master's because I wanted to go do a PhD. And so I had to propose research to one of the most foremost Africanist scholars to try to work with me and what would I propose that was of interest. And so it's related to the topic of my environment, human security, and conflict class. It was on natural resources and conflict. And I sat in a chair in this absolutely beautiful Boston Public Library. And I hammered out a proposal that I emailed, and he ended up saying yes. And that's what enabled me to kind of start this process of academic research. And it also instilled with me a love of libraries. I know my dad was an academic. I grew up in libraries, and the Boston Public Library, it's the third largest in the world, in the United States. Sorry, not the world, with the Library of Congress and the New York Public Library. It was built in something like 1848, and it has this huge hall that doesn't always look like it's a wedding. Um, this picture was they do private events at night, and they can put fancy flowers on it. But basically, you see the reading lamps. There's the normal chairs are less comfortable, but it's a public library. Anyone can come in there, and it's often packed on weekdays, and that's where I came up with my proposal and where I wrote the vast majority of my master's thesis. The only other reading room that I found that's as impressive would probably be the Widener Library at Harvard, in which you can get um, doesn't have free access, but it does have a similar kind of history. So yeah, when I was thinking about research proposals, it made me think of the agonizing process that I went through to write them, and to kind of say, I understand the difficulty, and that's why I put this together to try to make it as easy for you as possible. For students, I put this on the course page. I also have it on my website as well if you're interested in taking a look. So a couple of elements. I'm not going to go through the entire document, but it's there a way to summarize what you want to do and to get feedback on it. The elements can vary a little bit, I guess, from different type of paper to different kind of outcome that it's proposing. These elements I thought are the kind of ones that would be in common with most of them, starting with the research question, right? You have some kind of area of knowledge out there that you have a question about, right? Why? What is the relationship between natural resources and conflict? Why can oil lead to conflict in one area but not another one, right? And that is a research question, and then you come up with an argument saying that it's the political institutions in the country in which the natural resource is found, that you have a stable, established political institutions. They're more likely to be able to either use the resources for the benefit of the broader swath of society, or they can increase the opportunity costs by going to conflict, by having capacity to exert state control over the entire territory, whatever kind of argument that you make. So you start with your research question, then an argument that you say answers the question. And some of my students have been a little bit confused about the argument and hypotheses. An argument is the causal story that you're trying to tell, right? Why does something happen? It's because of X factor or Y factor or whatever. And then the implications of that is in the hypothesis that as X goes up, the probability of Y goes down, right? The hypothesis is saying, given the argument that I've just made, as one thing changes, another thing will change in a specific way. And then if you go test the hypothesis, the observable implications of that hypothesis is clear, that if the evidence supports it, you can kind of say, we can't find evidence to reject the hypothesis. But if the evidence is not supportive, then you can say, we reject the hypothesis in exchange for just the status quo, right? That it's not anything, the evidence doesn't support your hypothesis. The evidence section, right, that is the important part for different research questions and different arguments. Different forms of evidence might be appropriate. Sometimes it could be a case study. For my master's thesis, I looked at natural resources, 4 different types, in four different groups of countries that I tried to match on as many other factors as I could, and I tried to explain why it led to violence in one but not the other. And then in my dissertation and in my current research, it's more global scale evidence, but different evidence bases are useful for different kinds of questions, right? Every question and every argument has a slightly different kind of cases that it's applicable to. I also include in my guide a series of questions and challenges. How do I decide on a topic? How do I figure out what I think about the topic? How do I make that argument? Building on the literature review, right? What is acceptable to take from the literature review and what not? Usually with proposals, you end up taking just a few sentences from your literature review. For the final essay, maybe you would take a couple of paragraphs, right? But it's more the knowledge you generate from that earlier step than the actual words itself. Common mistakes, formatting issues. I go through a series of them. Um, the research proposal should be in paragraph form, not just bullet points. Please have page numbers again. Um, if you have direct quotations from sources, always make sure you have complete bibliographic information for that, including the page number where you found the quote, because the goal of research is to be replicable. So you want to make it as easy as possible for the reader. If the reader is curious about something you say, a quote that you use, a fact that you cite, they can go check it out for themselves. Because in this day and age, in the age of fake news and alternative facts, being able to gauge what's a reputable source of information and to be able to verify for yourself what other people have claimed or said is incredibly useful, and it's an underappreciated skill quite often. The rubric that I use for my research proposals, making sure that the topic is relevant to the course. If you have any concerns about whether your topic is relevant for my course, shoot me an email. Often it arrives out of the research that you have to cover for the class anyway, but it's always good to make sure, if you're not sure, make sure you have and my rubric falls along right with the structure of the paper. The research question, the argument, the evidence, and the basic kind of formatting and structure and grammatical errors. That's kind of the breakdown for the rubric. Yeah, that's a brief overview of research proposals. This is, I don't know, it was one of my favorite photos from last year in 2019. National Geographic has a series of awards it gives for different types of photography. I'm old enough to remember getting a subscription to National Geographic in paper form back from as long as I can remember, being able to look at pictures. My dad had a collection going back to the 19th century, and photography, as you can probably tell from my slides, I think in visual forms and as a way to convey information, it's a great kind of shortcut. And so, yeah, this was the winner from 2019, and in some ways, I'm just trying to survive, as I'm sure a lot of people are doing the onslaught of it. You just have to ride the wave, right? You can try to fight the river, or you can try to find a way to navigate it. So good luck. I look forward to reading your proposals for my class, and I hope you enjoy your research as much as I do. It's a difficult process, but I find it rewarding.